This video will show you how to replace your front steering knuckle assembly on this Toyota Corolla. This is part of your front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the front wheel's off the ground. After you've done that, we're going to remove all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we're going to be focusing on the axle nut. The reason why we're focusing on the axle nut first is because it's going to make it easiest to be able to gain access to the ball joint mounting nut. I'm using a 30mm 12-point socket for my axle nut. Now we're going to break this free. I'm using a hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle. Let's get some movement. Once you do see movement from here, we can continue on. Let's focus on the outboard side of the tie rod end, where it connects to our steering knuckle next. Commonly on these outer tie rod end nuts, you're going to find that it's a castle nut, and if that's the case, it's also going to have a locking cotter pin, which needs to be removed. Let's see if I can get some movement from this. We might just have to break it off. Yeah, that one's stuck in there. We'll just remove as much of this as possible and we'll continue on with our 17mm socket. A quick inspection of that. We're going to start it back on here, just a couple threads. Now continuing on, if you have a tie rod separator tool, you can use that. Most people don't have something like that. If that's the case, use some penetrant and tap along the steering knuckle with a hammer. The vibration should break this free. The nut is preventing this from falling and potentially hurting us. Now that we have that broken free, we can remove that tie rod end. Now we have some movement here. I'm going to take one of my original lug nuts and just start it on here, protecting the rotor from falling off and potentially hurting me. We're going to start removing the caliper from this area. For that, there are going to be 2 bolts along the backside. For each of these bolts, we're going to be using a 17mm. There's one up here, one just below it. For the first bolt, I'm going to fully remove it. A quick inspection, start it back in a couple threads. That'll prevent this from falling while we continue on to our second mounting bolt. Holding onto the caliper, we can remove that first bolt fully and remove the caliper from the area. A quick inspection of the brake pads, and we're going to hang this aside, putting no pressure on the flex hose. We're holding the rotor. Let's remove that lug nut and remove the rotor. Just a quick inspection of that, we can set it aside. Now along the other side of the knuckle, towards where we had removed our tie rod end, this is where we can see our ABS wheel speed sensor. There's a 10mm mounting bolt. Remove the bolt and the sensor. We'll set that aside. Let's start separating the steering knuckle from our front strut. Looking up in this area, you're going to find that you have 2 22mm nuts. There's bolts that come through from the backside. Those bolts are also 22mm headed bolts. So we're just going to go ahead and hold on to that. We'll loosen the nuts. Careful for our ABS wire, of course. This one off of here. Now at this point, we're going to have to wiggle this around a little bit. You should be able to pull it out of place. As we start pulling the knuckle down, you want to be extremely careful not to put a tug on your axle. You can pull the axle out this way. Typically for the lower ball joint nut, you're going to find that there's a locking cotter pin. You can remove that. You should replace it. They're not generally reusable. We're using a 19mm for our lower ball joint mounting nut. Once you have that off of there, just a quick inspection, we'll start it back on. Now let's make sure we support the axle so it's up and out of our way. We're going to swing the knuckle into position towards that front strut and just bring one of the bolts through. You can come from the front or the rear. It's only temporary. Now we'll just use our air hammer here. Get this back out of here. We'll start tilting this down, remove our ball joint nut, and remove the knuckle. There it is, friend. Prior to installing the brand new steering knuckle, let's make sure we clean and inspect our ball joint stud and ball joint boot. We want to make sure the boot is not torn in any way. It's time to install the brand new steering knuckle. We'll start down along the bottom. Go ahead and slide that onto the lower ball joint stud. Once you have that in place, we can continue on with our lower ball joint mounting nut. We'll start that on, snug it up. The torque for this will be 76 foot-pounds. We'll get our 19 millimeter on there. When you go to torque this, you're going to find it wants to spin on you. If that's the case, you can use a dowel or an awl and just make your way through one of the ports on the knuckle. Now, once you have that torqued, we need to pay attention to the slots on the mounting nut in comparison to the port on the ball joint stud. We need to install a locking cotter pin. If it's not aligned, continue tightening the nut until the very next slot is. After that, install your cotter pin. Now, once you do have it aligned, continue on with your locking cotter pin. Just slide it through. Now this one I'm going to have to flex on the far side there so I can bring it into position as close as possible. Just go ahead and give that a quick bend. Make sure it's peened over so there's no way this nut can loosen up on you while you're driving down the road. Now we can take the axle, we'll slide it into the knuckle. We're going to bring the knuckle all the way up to the strut. With the knuckle in position, we'll continue on with our two mounting bolts. Those are going to come through from the rear towards the front. Start on that mounting hardware. Be careful for your ABS wire, of course. They're started in. Snug them up and torque those to 177 foot-pounds. Let's just take this ABS sensor and wire. We're going to bring it over the top of the knuckle out of our way. We'll use some anti-seize on the hub mating surface. After that, we'll clean the back side of the rotor mating surface and continue on with the installation of the rotor, holding it in place with one of our lug nuts. Just button this out so the rotor cannot fall down on us while we continue on. We'll slide the caliper in place, start in our two mounting bolts. Once you have these started in, go ahead and snug them up. The torque will be 79 foot-pounds. Get this ABS sensor in place. Start the bolt in, snug it up. The torque for this is 73 inch-pounds. Let's get our tie rod in place. Snug it, torque this to 36 foot-pounds. Now that we have it snug, you know what to do. Align the slot on the nut in comparison to the port on the tie rod. Now it's time for the axle nut. course, we're going to start it on by hand. We'll bottom this out. The torque for this is going to be 156 foot-pounds. When you go to torque this, you may find that this spins on you. Now, if that's the case, you could have a second person pressing on the brake while you go ahead and torque this. Otherwise, if you don't have a second person, you could use a pry bar diagonally down towards the ground, preventing this from turning. For now, I'm going to snug this up. For this, we're not using an impact tool. It's time to torque the axle nut. I have my bar going across my lug studs down towards the ground, preventing this from spinning on me. We'll be torquing this to 156 foot-pounds. Now, if you were looking at the axle shaft itself, you're going to find that it has a slot making its way all the way in. We want to try to drive that nut into the slot, so I'm just using a hammer and punch. We'll give this a couple taps. You can go as far as you feel necessary. Essentially, we just want to make sure the nut does not loosen while we're driving down the road. Let's get our wheel in place. Now at this point, we're going to start on all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheel safely on the ground, and we can torque these to 76 foot-pounds. With the wheel back on the ground, let's torque each one of our 21mm lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of our front steering knuckle. At this point, go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test, listen for any odd noises, make sure you have no ABS light, and get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.